In the decades after World War II, Germany became the front line of a new kind of conflict, one fought not with bombs, but with ideology. When Nazi Germany collapsed in 1945, the victorious Allies divided the nation into 4 zones of occupation. The Soviet Union took the East. United States, Britain, and France controlled the West. Berlin, although located deep inside the Soviet zone, was also split. East Berlin became the capital of Communist East Germany, the GDR. West Berlin became a democratic island, surrounded by walls of suspicion. For years, people could still cross the city's open border. Doctors, engineers, teachers, millions of East Germans walked into West Berlin and never came back. By 1961, the GDR was hemorrhaging its workforce and its credibility. So, on the night of August 12, 1961, East German police and soldiers unrolled barbed wire through the streets of Berlin. By dawn, the Berlin Wall had begun to rise. Concrete replaced wire. Guard towers dotted the skyline, and the death strip was cleared sand, floodlights, and automatic guns. Families were separated overnight. Friends on opposite sides of a street suddenly lived in different worlds. So the wall became the symbol of the Cold War, an iron wound across the heart of Europe. Escape attempts were punished with prison or death, but no wall could stop imagination. In 1979, 2 families living hundreds of miles south of Berlin decided to test that idea. The Strelzics and the Wetzels lived in the small East German town of Pienig in Thuringia. They were ordinary citizens. Peter Strelzik, an electrician and former Air Force mechanic. Gunter Wetzel, a bricklayer and amateur engineer. Both men were skilled, practical, and quietly rebellious. Life in East Germany was gray, rigid, and suffocating. Stasi, the secret police, had informants everywhere. Neighbors spied on neighbors. Western radio was forbidden, yet secretly listened to at night. And for their children, the future promised only conformity. Peter and Gunter wanted more than survival. They wanted freedom. They wanted to live in a place where their sons could choose their paths, speak freely, and travel without fear. But leaving the GDR legally was impossible. Only diplomats or trusted party members were allowed to cross the border. So Peter Strelzik proposed something outrageous. What if we build a hot air balloon and fly over the wall? At first it sounded like fantasy, but the physics made sense. Lift, heat, buoyancy, all possible with the right materials. So they began to plan in secret. They studied books, listened to Western radio, and sketched designs on scrap paper. Fabric was their first problem. They needed nylon or taffalite, airtight and heat-resistant. Such fabric was rare in East Germany, so they improvised. They traveled from town to town, buying small amounts of cotton from different stores to avoid suspicion. They told shopkeepers they were making camping tents. Night after night, they sewed in attics and basements, stitching together nearly 1,000 square meters of material by hand. The burner was built from plumbing pipes and a propane tank Peter had modified. By September 1979, their first balloon stood ready, a patchwork of cotton and hope. They waited for the right night, strong east wind, clear skies. On September 28th, under cover of fog, the families loaded the burner, the children, and their fear into a homemade basket. They lit the flame. At first it worked. The balloon lifted slowly into the night, drifting westward. The children watched as forests turned to fields beneath them. But after a few minutes, the fabric began to leak. The burner couldn't maintain heat. The balloon sagged, falling toward the dark trees. They crashed hard in a wooded area still deep inside East Germany. Panicked, they destroyed what evidence they could and fled on foot. The next morning, a hunter found scraps of fabric. By nightfall, the Stasi were investigating. They measured footprints, collected fibers, and interviewed locals. Posters went up warning stores to report anyone buying large quantities of cloth. Peter and Gunter knew they had no time. They burned the remains of their first balloon and vowed to try again. Failure meant prison or worse, but success meant freedom. They switched from cotton to nylon, a stronger synthetic fabric. To buy it, they had to be clever. Gunter told suppliers he was making kites for a youth organization. Peter bought thread and rope from hardware stores miles apart. They never traveled together, never told anyone their plan, not even relatives. For 6 weeks, they worked every night. The wives, Petra Strelzik and Doris Wetzel, sewed for hours while the men built a new burner system with multiple propane jets. They tested airflow using small hot air models, hiding them quickly whenever headlights passed the window. Each flame, each hiss of gas, could betray them. By late October, the second balloon was ready. It was enormous, nearly 30 meters tall, stitched from over 1,200 square meters of nylon. They reinforced the seams with glue and tested the valves. Finally, the weather report predicted strong easterly winds, perfect for a westward flight. On the evening of September 28, 1979, they set out again. This time, everything had to go right. The 8 of them, 4 adults, 4 children, loaded their supplies into the basket. Peter checked the burner, Doris counted the fuel tanks, and Gunter whispered a final prayer. At 2 a.m., the flame roared to life. The balloon filled with hot air, glowing orange against the forest. They climbed aboard, the ropes released. And once again, they rose. Below them stretched the deadly border. Floodlights, mines, watchtowers, soldiers with rifles. If anyone spotted the balloon, they would open fire. The families could hear dogs barking in the distance, the hum of engines from a nearby patrol road. Inside the basket, the children huddled close. The adults took turns adjusting the burner to maintain altitude. The wind carried them toward the border fast. But as they crossed the 500-meter mark, clouds of condensation began to form. The burner struggled in the damp air. They were losing lift. Peter shouted over the roar of the flame, "Throw everything out!" They jettisoned equipment, clothes, maps, even spare fuel cans. The balloon steadied but continued to descend. Then, suddenly, the lights below vanished. Searchlights were gone. They had crossed the border. Moments later, they hit the ground hard, crashing through branches and sliding into a meadow. Silence? Were they in the west or still in the east? Peter climbed a hill and saw a farmhouse in the distance. He approached cautiously. A sign on the road read, "Wind to Scheschenbach." He didn't recognize the name. It wasn't on any East German map. And a man in a pickup stopped and asked, "Are you in trouble?" Peter hesitated. "Are we in the west?" The man nodded. "Of course. This is Bavaria." They fell to their knees in disbelief. After years of fear and months of secrecy, they were free. The escape made headlines around the world. Western newspapers called it *the Great Balloon Escape. Television crews arrived at the hospital where the families were recovering. The U.S. Embassy praised their ingenuity. For the East German regime, it was humiliating. They had been outsmarted not by spies or soldiers, but by ordinary citizens with sewing needles and propane tanks. Within days, new restrictions were placed on fabric sales across the GDR, but it was too late. The world had already heard their story. In the West, the families settled into new lives. Peter Strelzik opened a heating business. Gunter Wetzel became an aircraft mechanic. They gave interviews, but fame was never their goal. They wanted quiet lives for their children to grow up without fear. In 1982, Disney released a film dramatizing their story, Night Crossing. The movie used replicas of the original balloon and was shot in Germany and Austria. It captured the danger and hope of their journey and introduced their courage to a new generation. Meanwhile, behind the Iron Curtain, the wall still stood. Thousands more East Germans would risk everything in the years that followed through tunnels, rivers, even homemade planes. But none were as daring or as poetic as the two families who soared above it. When the Berlin Wall finally fell in 1989, Peter and Gunter watched on television with tears in their eyes. The world that had divided their lives was gone. Today, the original balloon is displayed in a museum in Bavaria. Its fabric patched and faded, but still intact, a monument to human determination. Visitors stand before it and imagine what it must have felt like, drifting through darkness toward an invisible border, guided only by courage and hope. Because in the end, the Berlin balloon escape isn't just a Cold War story. It's about what people will do for freedom. How ordinary individuals can create extraordinary acts when walls rise around them. When the world tells you that you can't leave, sometimes you have to build your own sky. If you enjoy exploring true stories of courage, mystery, and history, remember to like, subscribe, and stay curious. Another remarkable story unfolds soon here on NovusThread.